Mark Carney, you're going to spend less. You're going to be more frugal. But the first thing that you do is you're going to hire someone and pay them one of the most expensive salaries in the government, 50% more than you're making. Mark Carney has tapped former Trans Mountain CEO Don Farrell to run his new major projects office, the agency empowered to fast-track billion-dollar developments. But Farrell's record shows a pattern of resisting public transparency while leading crown corporations. So why should Canadians trust her? Or maybe the question is, why does Carney trust her? Let's take a look. Published in Bloomberg, Carney taps ex-Trans Mountain CEO to lead major projects office. This was on August 29th, 2025. This is from the Major Projects Office website, and it's a profile on Don Farrell. So it says that she's an excellent executive with over 35 years experience in the energy and infrastructure sectors, currently serves as independent chair of the board at the Chemours Company, board chair of Trans Mountain Corporation, and board director at Portland General Electric. She previously served as board director at ATCO Limited. So it talks about while she was at Trans Mountain, she oversaw its multi-billion-dollar expansion project, and TransAlta Corporation, where she led major transition from coal to renewables. And it goes on and on and on, and cites her credentials. And Mark Carney has stated in written statements of him that he has full confidence in her abilities. Full confidence in her abilities. Just like full confidence in Paul Chek. Just like full confidence in Gary Anandasangri. Forgive us, Mr. Carney, if we're not confident in your level of confidence in these people that you have full confidence in. So, all of a sudden, everyone started to look into Miss Farrell, and Franco Terrazzano, one of our friends over at the Canadian Taxpayer Federation, posted this on X. The head of the government's major project office will make a salary between $577,000 and $679,000 per year. This is crazy. What's crazier is that this is close to the salary of other top bureaucrats at Crown corporations. Cut government fat cats. And he links to this story in particular. So, let's dive in. Head of the federal government's new major project office will earn a salary between $577,000 and $679,000 a year, according to an order in council issued last week. Prime Minister Mark Carney has tapped Don Farrell, former CEO and chair of the board of directors of the Trans Mountain Corporation, to run the Calgary-based office. The Liberals have pledged to speed up approvals for major infrastructure projects deemed to be in the national interest, and the new office is meant to oversee that process. The Prime Minister's office said last week that it would be headquartered in Calgary, but will have offices, quote, in other major Canadian cities, end quote. Not sure why, but apparently we like to spend more money. Farrell's salary is roughly in line with the maximum for Crown Corporation CEOs, according to the government's website. The CBC tries to justify. Yeah, there's a reason for that, because in the next paragraph it says, by comparison, the salary for the head of Canada Post is between $506,000 and $596,000, and the CBC president's salary is between $468,000 and $551,000. None of those salaries that are listed are over $600,000. What he wants to pay Don Farrell could be upwards of $700,000. That's an extra $100,000, folks. So, okay, who is this lady? Well, for one, it keeps mentioning that she was the CEO and president of TransAlta. So, it's based in Calgary, so maybe that's a kind of a pseudonym for Trans Alberta. I don't know. But she was there from approximately 2012 to 2021. Now, the whole point of why she was there was allegedly to get them off of coal. Okay, fine. Well, turns out she found a way to do that, and it required a lot of money. Now, TransAlta didn't shell out this money to do that. They went to somebody else. Guess who they went to, folks? TransAlta announces initial closing of the Brookfield strategic financing. TransAlta Corporation today announced the closing of the initial tranche of its previously announced $750 million strategic investment by an affiliate of Brookfield Renewable Partners. Quote, having achieved this important milestone, we can now start to realize the benefits of our partnership and financing with Brookfield, end quote, said Don Farrell, CEO of TransAlta. Quote, we are moving swiftly to put capital to work, including advancing our coal to gas conversions, end quote. Now, let's just make this very clear. When this investment started and was announced, Mark Carney was not part of Brookfield. He was still over in England enjoying his, $12,000 a month mansion and getting yelled at by the English for the wonderful job he was doing as the governor of the Bank of England. But he did join later. When did he join? Brookfield announced his appointment of Mark Carney as vice chair and head of ESG and impact fund investing. That was in August of 2020. So the interesting thing about the end of 2020 is that at the end of that year, that's when the other $400 million was actually given to TransAlta. See, it was broken into two, $350 million, and then there was a second tranche of 400, and that makes up that $750 million strategic investment. And part of the deal was that Brookfield got to sit on the board of governors. My estimation is that's how Mark Carney and Don Farrell actually got to meet. So as a result of the firm business relationship and very high strategic investment from Brookfield into TransAlta after Mark Carney stepped onto the team at Brookfield, no doubt they had some sort of correspondence. So, after TransAlta, Don Farrell decides to take another job. Where does she go? Trans Mountain Corporation, or TMC. So this is a crown corporation that was purchased back in 2018 by the federal government, and this is basically to run, the Trans Mountain Pipeline. So she was there until about 2024-ish. And she still sits on the board, but she was CEO from about 2022 until 2024. But something interesting happened while she was there. Story broke this past Tuesday on September 2nd by Blacklock's reporter. CEO failed in, quote, legal duties. Counsel for the Information Commissioner filed a lawsuit 2 years ago after Farrell repeatedly ignored lawful orders to answer public demands for release of records from Trans Mountain Corporation. Farrell was CEO of taxpayer-owned Trans Mountain at the time. Court records showed in 2019 an access to information request was submitted for, quote, all files, audio or video recordings, text messages, security briefings, documents, reports, or correspondence, end quote, referring to individuals with a, quote, specific organization, end quote. The organization was unnamed, but is believed to be a First Nation or environmental group. Documents indicate the request was ignored. The Information Commissioner issued an order that CEO Farrell, within 30 days, either confirm the existence of records and release them, provide some legal reason why they should be censored, or justify any claim that the files did not exist. The order was also ignored. Quote, the CEO is in violation of her legal duty by failing to implement the Commissioner's order under the Act, end quote, lawyers wrote the court. They asked that a federal judge release any relevant records. The application was filed in federal court in Ottawa. Records suggest the dispute was subsequently settled out of court. Maybe she's like Mark Carney and just isn't used to the fact that when you're working for a crown corporation where you're accountable to taxpayers, where you're literally paid by taxpayers, that you're actually bound to provide some transparency. Now, the interesting thing is this isn't the only time this has happened. There's another access to information request that was issued to Trans Mountain while she was there, and they tried to ignore that too. So we find this on the Information Commissioner of Canada's website, and you can see Trans Mountain Corporation 2023 OIC1. So basically what this was is there was a complaint brought to the Information Commissioner's office that said that someone had, or an organization had, brought forth an access to information request, and that Trans Mountain said, well, you know, it may exist, it may not exist, and if it does exist, then we can't give it to you because it's possible that if we give it to you, it may violate the act. But we're not actually going to be telling you that it even exists. So that's what this actually says. And the complaint said that TMC improperly responded to the access to information request and basically didn't even say whether or not the records existed or not. The issue with this one is that previously another access to information request was made, independent of this one, for similar records, and TMC said that they actually did exist. So this presents a problem for TMC. So the order in council actually sided with the people that actually made the complaint, as you can see here. So similar thing to the previous one, where it says within 30 days you shall provide the disclosed records as requested. And as we see, this was committed to by the organization, and there's no indication that they didn't comply with this order. But the problem is they had to do it kicking and screaming. So this is the lady, Dawn Farrell, who headed a Crown organization only a couple of years ago and is still on the board, that doesn't seem to understand that when someone files an access to information request for a Crown corporation, unless you have a very, very, very good reason, you have to provide that information. This isn't like a private organization where somebody sends you an email and says, hey, I want records for this, and you can tell them to go take a hike. This is a taxpayer-funded organization. And this is the lady that we have in charge of the Major Projects Office. A lady that, I don't know, she doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies when I see this stuff. When she actually had to be dragged to court heading one of these organizations because she would not provide the transparency the Canadian taxpayers demand. Now, one of the speculations as to why they weren't doing this is because Trans Mountain was actually founded in, I think, 1950, something like that. And the speculation is that they didn't consult with First Nations, they didn't consult with any Indigenous folks, and they didn't really care about any environmental rules at that time. So when people were potentially asking for information that goes back that far, it doesn't exist. Or their records don't really put the organization and therefore the federal government in a really good light. Now, do they? But that doesn't matter. You're bound to actually release this stuff. You don't get to claim, well, it would be politically inconvenient for the Liberal government to actually release this stuff, so we're not going to. Now, we don't know if that's actually the case, but this is one of the likely speculative scenarios. So Mark Carney wants to take this lady and put her in charge of this major projects office that has no history. It's standing up from scratch. They're going to spend a ton of money on it. They're already wanting to spend $700,000, and that doesn't include the bonus, folks. We can't forget the bonus. That's just a salary. That's not total compensation for this person. So she could be potentially making 10, 20, 30% on top of that. We don't know. So in that case, you're looking at what, $800,000, $900,000? It's insane. So, Mark Carney, you're going to spend less. You're going to be more frugal. But the first thing that you do is you're going to hire someone and pay them one of the most expensive salaries in the government, 50% more than you're making. Give me a break.